Hi, Sir Gerald here, your learning buddy, and I want you to watch it till the end. You may answer the exercise also. You can just comment below or you can send me private messages. For today's discussion, we're going to talk about comparative thinking skills, primary and secondary sources. So it's divided into two parts, but let's try to merge it for now. This is already for week number 5 of the first quarter, module number 4. This is under the MELC. Compare and contrast the contents of the materials viewed with outside sources of information in terms of accessibility and effectiveness. Please stay tuned. I want you to answer this one. What type of textual aid you can best use in organizing your thoughts to show comparison and contrast of a topic? Any guesses? There are 4 choices. Very good. The answer is Venn diagram. I think you're familiar with it. Let's proceed. Comparing refers to the blank and contrasting is looking at the blank. So what do you think is the answer? Good job. Refers to the similarities and contrasting is looking at the differences. Next, comparison and contrast is an essential ability for... What's your answer? Good job. That's a reading comprehension skill. You did great. Now, after going through this presentation, everyone is expected to determine the similarities and differences in the material viewed through a textual aids, establish the importance of comparative thinking skills, identify the strategies of comparative thinking skills, distinguish primary source from secondary source of information, and create the material using outside sources in terms of its accessibility and effectiveness. I hope you will be able to accomplish all of this. So, let's get things started. Comparative thinking skills. Now, I want you to look at this one and then try to think what you can perceive out of this line. There you go. When students compare and contrast, they make meaningful connections within and beyond the text. And that's very helpful, especially when you are reading such article, when you're reading a text, or anything that can be read. Now, comparative thinking skills, teaching students to compare and contrast. So comparative thinking provides fundamental or foundational cognitive skills that support early learning. It is your ability or our ability to compare and contrast, of course, and that is considered to be one of the highest ordered thinking or reading comprehension skills. Without the ability to group things effectively in terms of their similarities and differences, much of what we consider as learning would be impossible. So of course, if we don't have this kind of skill, probably we can say that no learning takes place. Now, I want you to check this on. When do you compare and contrast? When there are many and single, when there are short and long, when there's big and small. That's actually how you are comparing things, right? But if you're going to apply it in context, let's try to define them. Compare in relation to reading refers to the process of identifying the similarities and also the differences between two things. That's comparison. Contrast, on the other hand, refers to identifying only, take note of that, only the differences between two things. If comparing refers to identifying similarities and differences, contrast only refers to identifying only the differences between two things. Okay, and this is applied in our reading comprehension. Now, these are the strategies in determining comparison and contrast. We can have their Venn diagram, which is very common. Okay, and we may have their story comparison tool, wherein, for example, you are presented with different stories, and all you have to do is you're gonna make it this way. It's like a story map, but all you have to do here is like you're comparing two. Next, these are the steps on how to approach compare and contrast questions, especially if you are tasked to answer such questions or activities given by your teachers. So first, you have to analyze the question. It is very important that you clearly understand what exactly the question is asking you students to do. So you have to break these questions into parts. If you think it's difficult to grasp or to understand, you have to do the simplifying of these questions or break these questions out. Next, identify the similarities and differences in the content. If you are presented with reading selections or articles, you have to start to read the text and take note of the similarities and differences in terms of the content. Okay, so you may use the strategies of highlighting, underlining, and you may take down notes in bullet forms. That's very helpful. Step number 3, identify the similarities and differences in the structure. If earlier it was about the content, for now, we'll focus on the structure. Depending on the exact nature of the question, you may look at the variety of elements of structure, including the length of the sentences and paragraphs, the progression of ideas and arguments, the point of view, and many more. So you have to take note of this when you are identifying the similarities and differences of the reading selection or the text. Okay? Next, identify similarities and differences in media. How is this done? Advances in technology make it even more important that students develop their literacy skills in media beyond the printed word. So sometimes you may want to have videos, you may want to have audio, you may want to have pictures or whatnot in order for you to come up with a good similarities and differences of such selections or articles. So don't just rely on printed materials or textbooks and what were given to you, because that would help you improve your literacy skills. Evaluate now. The following questions are suggestions of areas to focus on to evaluate the text. How are you going now to evaluate the entire reading selection or text after applying those steps? Which of the text is the most convincing or more convincing than the other? Which of the text best employs appropriate media? Which of the text is the most enjoyable? You have to ask these questions before you will evaluate a selection or a text. I hope it's clear. Now, let's explore. You may want to read this article, which can be found in your module. You have to read coronaviruses past and present. Take note of the significant details as you proceed. Again, I want you to take note of the important points here. Now, that's it. This can be found in your module. Okay, let's say for example you're finished. You may now share your thoughts after reading. Okay. All you have to do is to compare and contrast various aspects, for example, of Netflix as a streaming service and YouTube as a platform in watching short films or movies. You may use the comparison and contrast matrix. So let's say, for example, what's the attribute or attribute 1 of both YouTube and Netflix, and then you have to compare and contrast them. Okay, for example, what are the features of YouTube? What about Netflix? That's how you're gonna do this activity. Okay? Next, I want you to try this on. What's your answer here? Please check. this gonna be the second part of our discussion? The answer is source. Okay. We will be discussing the primary and secondary sources, which are very important in order for us to come up with an article or a composition. These provide basic and raw information about a certain topic. A primary source gives you the first-hand evidence and direct access to the subject of your research. So for example, if you are tasked to look for some information or details and you wanted to come up with primary sources, you may have this one here. Okay, it says raw information. So all you have to find there are primary sources. Texts of laws and other original documents. Newspaper reports by reporters who witnessed the event. Speeches, diaries, letters, and interviews. What the people involved said or wrote. Original research, data, survey data such as census or economic statistics. If these are first-hand information, then we can consider them as primary sources, meaning it was not yet quoted by the other person and then you copied. It's not going to be considered a primary source. Photographs taken by you, for example, or taken by someone. Next, secondary sources are one step removed from primary sources, though they often quote or otherwise use primary sources. So let's say, for example, it was gathered from a primary source, then of course it can be considered as a secondary source. They can cover the same topic but add a layer of interpretation and analysis. So, for example, if the interview was already analyzed or if the data was already analyzed by someone, by an author or a writer, that is now considered a secondary source. Okay? Please see the difference. Most books about a topic, analysis is what I've told you, or interpretation of data, scholarly or other articles about a topic, documentaries, essays about a topic. Okay? Yeah, because it combines everything. Any questions? Alright, there's none, I believe. Check this out. We have their examples of primary sources, which are artwork, diary, interview, performance, treaty or an agreement. Secondary sources, on the other hand, I want you to check this out so that you'll be able to see the differences between the two. Take note. Consider the following questions that can serve as your guide in distinguishing the type of source. When it is a primary source, you have to ask this question. Alright. Please check them out. Next, let's dig deeper. I want you to analyze the given scenarios about using different types of sources. Identify whether the material being described is primary or secondary. Number 1. Okay. Primary source and the secondary source. Yes. Very good. Next, please. The published articles and the information they got from the research findings. What's your answer? Good job. Secondary sources for the first one and primary sources for the second one. How about the third one? Please analyze clearly. That is great. Primary source for the first one and secondary source. Please complete the table with correct answers from the word pool. Take time to answer. I hope you'll get the perfect score. Alright, let's apply. I want you to gather information about the local tourist spots in your city using different sources. You may use the internet, interview among your household members, catalogs, reference books, among others. based on what we've discussed on primary and secondary sources. So you have to list down like this: source number 1, where did you get it? Source number 2, source number 3. Okay? I hope everything is clear for this part. Any questions? None? That's good. Don't hesitate to ask if you have any. And for our reflections, compare and contrast the information across the 3 sources. Discuss the following questions. What do you observe? Was there any conflicting information? What have you noticed now? What can be reflected after doing your research? And the last one. Okay, that would be all I get. Thank you so much for joining me in this session. You did great, and I want you to continue what you have started. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And thank you for watching. Stay safe. See you again in our next video. God bless everyone. Bye bye. Sir Gerald here, your learning buddy.